What now after a major break in Austin's most infamous cold case? The latest on the yogurt shop murders. It's a case that both shocked and terrified the growing city of Austin in 1991. 4 teenage girls killed at the I Can't Believe It's yogurt shop on Anderson Lane. The shop set on fire. Over the years, the investigation took twists and turns, from wrongful convictions to an eventual breakthrough in the case after decades of lingering questions. In September 2025, the Austin Police Department announced ballistic and DNA evidence finally linked one Robert Brashears to the quadruple murder. By December, the Travis County District Attorney began taking steps towards clearing the names of 4 men previously wrongly accused of the crime. Plus, we're hearing more from some of the family members of these girls about where they go from here. So joining me now is KXAN public safety reporter Hollis to dig into this case. Thanks so much.
Yeah, absolutely happy to be here. And like you said, this one has a lot of twists and turns, so it's nice that we're able to talk through it like this.
Yeah, it's hard to have lived in Austin for any amount of time and not heard about this case. But in case someone has maybe not kept up with some of the recent developments or the case itself, back us all the way up to 1991. Give us a brief outline of what happened on that night.
So 4 teen girls ranging in age from 13 to 17 were all found dead inside the burned down, I Can't Believe It's yogurt shop, and police said that there was evidence to show that they were also sexually assaulted. So, as we move forward and we learn more details about this, it's really hard when a case starts out with details, that are so shocking. So as you mentioned, it's clearly rocked the community for a lot of reasons.
Your latest report focused on 4 men who were accused in this case. And over the years, those accusations took a lot of different turns, and ultimately there were questions about their guilt, and that's now being walked back. So catch people up on who those people are.
Yeah, and bear with us, there's a little bit of court speak here, so I'm going to try to simplify it as much as possible. So 4 men were originally charged and accused in this case: Forrest Wellborn, Maurice Pierce, Michael Scott, and Robert Springsteen. And they all went through the criminal justice system in different capacities. So Forrest Wellborn was actually no-billed by a grand jury, meaning that he was charged. A grand jury found him, not to be guilty. So it didn't move forward through the criminal justice system from there. And Maurice Pierce, his case was dismissed before his trial started, and Pierce actually ended up passing away in 2010 in a police incident. So later we'll get into how that impacts the current court proceedings. The other 2 men originally accused in this case actually got convicted. That was Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen. Springsteen had the most serious punishment. He was actually on death row, and Scott was sentenced to life in prison. Those cases actually got dismissed and overturned because of a constitutional violation. But even though in the end all these cases were dismissed, the district attorney's office explained it as it was still a shadow over them, and that's because of so many reasons. 1, there was no official exoneration, and 2, on paper, the capital murder charges still showed up on their records.
And I'm sure just the reputation, their names being so much in the public as this case was covered. So we'll get back to the process of official exonerations in a bit, but we want to note for folks, this is all coming about because of that major break we talked about. This actually happened just weeks before we launched our show, Unsolved Central Texas, and so we haven't covered this case, even though it's kind of embedded in the DNA of who Austin is. A lot of people have grown up with questions about this case. So take us back to September. You were there in the room when Austin police announced this huge breakthrough.
And that was such a surreal moment for a couple of reasons. I remember saying this in my live shot that day, that typically when there's a crime update that happens at the police department in, a relatively small room, and there aren't that many people there, all the local crews are there, maybe there'll be someone from out of town there, but this case was so big and this breakthrough was so big, and people have been waiting for answers for so long from across the country, across the world. People are invested in this case, that this conference and this announcement was held in the city council chambers, and there were HBO cameras there. Some of the biggest cameras I've physically ever seen were in that room. There were, documentary crews. There were people who were involved in the case back then, all there. The room was packed. And mind you, city council chambers, very big room when you think about what kind of events that room holds. So it was packed. And so immediately, us knowing the case, we knew the magnitude of it, but then walking in there, you can really just feel, wow, this is about to be something big. I know that's not necessarily what you asked, but I wanted to provide that context in there. And then the announcement itself, the Austin Police Department had used ballistic and DNA evidence to match Robert Brashears to the case. And for folks who may not know, DNA and ballistic evidence does not work the way that it works in crime shows and fictional shows that you see on TV. It's not just, oh, here's a piece of DNA, I know who this is matched to. It has to be, linked within a system and whatnot. And the police department did ultimately say that it used the ballistic and DNA evidence and kind of compared the MO to this case and a case in Kentucky with Brashears and his DNA and his involvement in that case, and also determined that he acted alone, which was a big question that I know we had going into this press conference. Like, okay, well, you had these 4 people, and then there was a lull in this case for so long. Are you sure? And the police department really doubled down on the fact that all of the evidence does show that Brashears acted alone in this case.
We know also in that room that day were the family members of these 4 girls who have been so involved in the case over the years. Talk about what they had to say in light of this breakthrough and learning, like you said, that this was one person who committed this horrific crime.
One of the quotes, and I don't have the exact quote, but one of the things one of the family members said that really stuck with me was kind of speaking directly to Brashears, who also, by the way, has since passed away, so can't move forward with prosecuting him. So this was kind of their, allocution moment, so to speak. But she had said that they were robbed of a life of nieces and nephews and grandchildren, and robbed of a life of sisters to grow old with. And she started crying as she said that. And that just, I think a lot of times it's really easy to get really interested and invested in the details of a case and like the true crime sense, and then it's always just really important to remember how profoundly this impacted these families. And that was a sister of one of the victims, so she was just a child herself at the time.
Yeah, so many of the families that spoke that day, I think so many of us will never get their words out of our heads, for sure. I want to get back to your latest round of reporting. I think the key detail that really kind of rocked so many people's understanding of this case was that Brashears is believed to have acted alone, and the impact that has on the 4 men whose lives we were just discussing who got wrapped up in this case. So you were able to kind of break some news about what the steps now look like for clearing their names.
So the first piece of paperwork that was filed that we reported on is essentially a formality, but it is the first step. It does open the door to exoneration for these 4 men. It officially goes, and it's in essence the official notice to their counsel, to their defense attorneys, that this is happening. So, and all of them, they still have attorneys. Even though their cases were dismissed, they've still been working with attorneys this whole time. So it officially assigns their attorneys to this, and it's the official notice that, hey, we're going to move forward with this. So now both sides can actually look at the evidence in a official capacity, and with the ultimate goal eventually being exoneration. Because as I mentioned before, even though these cases were dismissed, there were convictions that were overturned. This, whether it's reputation or something like if you get pulled over, or if you're applying for a job, or you're applying for an apartment, those capital murder charges still showed up for these men, and it's been decades. So now trying to move forward with actually officially expunging that.
And we've reported too, there are also actually some financial incentives to pursue official exoneration as well.
Right.
Is that something you can shed some light on for people? What does that look like?
So it all depends, but there's a certain amount of money, don't know it off the top of my head, but it's tens of thousands of dollars per year that these exonerees could potentially be owed following all of this. And all of the specifics there, that's going to come once the exculpatory evidence is identified, and there's, potentially different variations of time that they'll be paid out for.
Depending on how long they spent behind bars and things like that.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that'll all play a factor too, and that's all just kind of super early in the works. I did ask the district attorney's office about that, and they said they're more than happy to talk about that as things move forward. But yes, in addition to the reputation, there is this financial compensation available as well.
So after this news about these filings surfaced, you were able to reconnect with some of the victims' family members. What did they tell you about this? I'm sure you'll be checking in with them as these processes proceed, but what was their initial reaction?
So I almost felt funny reaching out to them at first, but I know my policy is always, hey, let's ask if this party has anything that they want to say, and if they do, let's share it. But since this was so focused on the men who were originally convicted, I was curious, hey, as a family member, for such a long time, you strongly believed, and so did the courts, that these people were guilty of this heinous crime. What's going through your head now? And they kind of mentioned that it's really been a haze since the big breakthrough in September. And once they did learn that Brashears acted alone, this is something that they expected. And I asked, is this something you're going to follow closely? And they said they're going to kind of take it day by day and see, how much they really want to follow that portion of it, given that they do have some closure on their end.
So what can you tell us about what the 3 surviving men of these 4 or their attorneys have to say about all of this?
So I did speak with the attorneys for 2 of them, and they had said they're really pleased to see this moving forward, but because of how many twists and turns, they're cautiously optimistic at this point. Not that they're distrustful of the process, but they just want to kind of wait until all is said and done before they kind of share more about it. But they really did talk about how driven they were to continue to fight for their clients through all of this, given everything that happened. The attorney for Robert Springsteen, who I spoke with, she said that she actually took this case, I think around the time it was overturned, so in the early 2000s, and she was just beginning her career, and she was a clerk on the case, and she had mentioned something along the lines of, I kind of thought this was how all cases worked, and then saw this all pan out through, and now she's, his main attorney. So she's stuck with this case for so long, and they're, again, cautiously optimistic about how everything is going to go, but really, for lack of better words, looking forward to this process.
Lots to watch with this, and we know you'll be following it closely for us, Bree, but we know in the days and weeks after the announcement about the breakthrough in this case, police did note that there was still some investigating to be done. They were, as you said, following every loose end to ensure that they had gotten this right this time. Do you have any intel at this point on, is that investigating still going on? Are there still things that Austin police are trying to wrap up to finally be able to ultimately give closure to everyone involved in this case?
So the biggest indication I have is from the district attorney's office rather than police at this point. They have not provided me an official update, and when I brought up this new motion, they didn't have any comment. They kind of said, everything we said at the press conference still stands. But I know that when that announcement was initially made, the district attorney's office had said they are going to wait until these decisions and the findings from the police department are more finalized before they move forward. So given that this is now moving forward, that is my indication that we are, reaching that official finalization of that investigation.
Maybe someday soon, ultimate closure for these families and for the city, people who've watched this case for years.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Bree, we know you'll be following it as there are still going to be updates, but we so appreciate you coming on and shedding some light on the latest in such an horrific and important case in Austin.
Of course, yeah, like you said, we'll keep following it.
Join us next week on KXAN Plus for another episode of Unsolved Central Texas. New episodes air every Thursday at 1. And watch any episode anytime. Just go to KXAN.com or look for the KXAN Plus Originals category on our streaming app. We'll see you next week.